okay?
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural In Conversation with the ROI series. And today I am joined by Andrew Farmer, Chris Bennett, and Heidi Joe, all members of the ROI. My name's Tim Benson. I'm the president of the ROI. And yeah, I just wanted to have a chat really about painting and about what we do as artists, and to basically just talk about that so that hopefully you find something interesting to listen to. So today we're going to be talking about inspiration as painters and what it is that really gets us going individually. It's a massive subject, obviously, and it's so different for everybody, but I think it's a very interesting area and fundamental to what we do, because without inspiration, it's very difficult to actually paint. So, I mean, speaking for myself, inspiration comes in many different forms. I'm inspired by landscapes. I'm inspired by portraits. I'm inspired by still life. But really, it has to be the right take on those to get me going. So really, I'd just like to sort of put it out there as just a sort of general topic. So, you know, straight away into Andrew. Andrew, what inspires you as an artist?
I think for me, inspiration comes from seasons, really. I've always kind of followed the seasons as an artist, and especially as, I guess, primarily an outdoor landscape painter or plein air painter. So just working locally mainly as well, tapping into my locality throughout the seasons, but also seasons in a more kind of metaphorical way. So in terms of when my kids came into my life, then suddenly that's a whole nother world opened up to me in terms of inspiration. And I do remember drawing and painting my son during his naps in the buggy, or getting him outside, trying to get him to sleep, but also drawing and painting him while he's sleeping and napping. So seasons, not just in terms of spring, summer, autumn, winter, but seasons of life as well. So yeah, and like yourself, I'm inspired by landscape, portraits, still life as well. But it really does depend kind of what's going on in my life as well. So as I say, more metaphorical seasons of life, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. You were talking about outside external influences, yeah, and how they affect you as a painter. I mean, I think that what's been happening over the last few years, with COVID times, has played a massive part in people's response as artists, both positively and negatively as well. So I think we're all, we're not working in hermetically sealed environments. We're not oblivious to what's happening in the outside world. So inspiration can come in many different forms. Heidi Joe, I mean, what would you say?
I'd say that I'm very visual. I know some people work a lot from their head, and I'm very much led by things seen, things that I've seen. And the most common place I get my inspiration is from an effect of the light. So it could be just a contre-jour scene, or some rim lighting, or the way that the light changes shapes. I'm also very shape driven, so it's not so much for me the subject, although I do recognize also that I really appreciate a narrative element as well in painting. But it's just more the visual, just the way that sunlight transforms something, which is, I think, why I really became more of a plein air painter, because I feel like I kind of I need to get out there and see things. It's so much more cool than anything I can think of, when what I see out there in nature. So very much inspired by the effect of the light, whether that be, whether that involves figures or landscape or still life, or the translucency or whatever it is. Yeah.
And I suppose, as predominantly plein air painters, both Andrew and Heidi Joe, the sort of the transience of the light plays into a sort of urgency when you work, which gives a sort of dynamic and I suppose vital response in your painting. You know, the fact is light changes very, very quickly, and you need to capture that moment as you see it.
That's very true. I think that's what it is. You seeing this fleeting effect and wanting to kind of capture that for other people to see and enjoy. I think it's really important.
I think what Hayley Joe was saying about the light, being kind of light driven, I think that's true of me as well to a certain extent. And Hayley Joe, you've probably felt this so many times. You know, you might be out walking your dog and you haven't got your paints, and you see a subject and it's in the morning. Great, I'll come back and I'll paint that later. So you kind of clock it. You're always scouting for the next subject wherever you go. But anyway, so you go back later on and it doesn't do the same thing. It's most likely because the light's not the same. You know, maybe the roof's not being caught by the light in the same way, or the light swung around too much and the shadows are on the wrong side now. So I can definitely kind of connect with what you're saying about, you know, being attracted to the light. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that you know, one could say, well, you know, take a photo in that moment, and of course, you know, this is obviously a completely different conversation about photography and art and the validity of it, or not, or whichever way you fall on the matter. But certainly cameras, certainly with landscapes and light, they tend to they're quite reductive. They oversimplify the situation in front of you. They tend to sort of blow out the lights, and it's very difficult to get a balanced exposure. And also they are sort of freeze framing a moment that is fundamentally elemental. And I think that one's response to that as a painter shifts quite significantly. There isn't necessarily the same urgency as a painter, which leads to a different result. I mean, I paint from photographs, and I paint on plein air as well, but they're definitely different things, I would say. So Chris, what's what's the driver for you? What gets you going as a painter?
Yeah, well, I've done both things. I mean, like Andrew and Heidi Joe. I'll get that'll become more fluent. I promise you. Like your name, Heidi.
Yeah, you got it wrong. You got it wrong, Chris.
Yeah, we can actually have the whole conversation about trying to get her name right. But so I can really identify a lot with what they're saying, or all three of you are saying. But I'll bring it down a bit because I also work for my head as well. So the business of what inspires me is less obvious to me. I mean, I've had all those, countless times I'm out walking with my wife and I see something, I think, I just want to get back and paint it, because it seems to fade. If I was standing there with all the gubbins, it keeps the emergencies there to do something. So it keeps you alive to it. So in other words, nature's presencing itself all the time. And of course, when you go back and you think, oh, I'll try and paint about that, the presencing isn't there anymore. So you're just left with what you have. And now, okay, you have a photograph if you do it that way. But again, it's this presencing that the photograph doesn't give you. The experience is taken out of it. And all the things we know about why it's just alluded to it, that photographs do these sort of things of blowing things out and they flatten stuff and you don't see it with two eyes and so on and so forth. But also it brings it down to, so this business of presencing, that when nature or your surroundings give you this something, I've got to make a painting out of that, or try to. But if you're not doing that, then the business of what inspires you becomes a lot more, it's not that it becomes more personal, because it's the same thing, the same issues there, but it's in a less embodied form outside you. So therefore I've had to do a lot of thinking about what it is that inspires me, because it's something, I'm either painting a memory or whatever. So, and the best way I think I can say it is that we can think of it that inspiration has a lot to do with, it's very coupled with this business of having something to say about something. So you're inspired to speak. So one's sitting there and you're listening to a conversation, and let's just say they're talking about, I don't know, flower. You know, I don't know anything about flower, and so I generally listen. You know, whereas if the subject comes about, say, painting or I don't know, houses, you know, because I'm moving house, I think, yeah, this. So I'd have something to say about it. So I feel this desire to speak. So inspiration has a lot to do. It's really coupled very closely with this business of needing to having something to say about it. And I noticed that if one looks at one's work, even if you're a plein air painter, and I don't mean even if just as a derogatory thing at all. It's just that it's a much more one-to-one. So you don't see that thing that sits in between you and it. You don't see this sort of thing that is the thing that's really going on. The painting is a kind of is a physicalization of the communion you have with what's out there. But when out there's not out there and it's more a bunch of memories and so on, that communion is a lot tighter, is it? But it's still there. There's still this sort of memory and the person painting it, as it were. But the thing just collapses a lot more. It's not like this, it's like this. So if one looks at one's own work, whether you're a plein air painter or someone who paints from imagination, we could talk about that. I'll throw the thing open for what people want to think about that is. But when you look at your own work, you know, just have it out and you think, how have I been going over the last couple of years? Is this better? What you notice is the best paintings are when you have something to say, and they dry up on you when you said what you had to say, or you realize you haven't really got much to say about it anyway. So this business of inspiration, having something to say about something, is really cool. And that's caught up there, that's nested in this bigger thing, which is the painter subject. And I'll leave it on, someone once said to me, when a painter finds their subject, they are really finding their forms. So in other words, Hayley Jones just said, you've got it's the way the light catches a roof and a garden chair or something. It would be because somehow that configuration is locking to a lot of experiences deep down, and somehow the forms of there respond to some internal psychological furniture. But I'm starting to ramble a bit, so I'm going to throw it open to the other guys.
Well, Chris, I mean, you know, very as typical of you, very eloquently put, and I completely understand what you're saying, and I'd like to sort of expand slightly from my point of view on one of the things you were talking about, and that's you know, inspiration coming from there being a reason behind what it is you're doing, and or even sort of a narrative element. And certainly that's something that earlier on in my career as an artist wasn't really there for me. It wasn't particularly important for me. I was very much learning my craft, and I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that I'm not learning my craft anymore. One is always constantly learning, and the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn. However, you know, it was really about the sort of the nuts and bolts of painting and how to create images, and preferably images that were interesting to look at and were technically well executed. And that for me was the driver. That was my inspiration for those years of my practice. Very important too. But certainly in the last few years, my focus has shifted, and my inspiration comes from the necessity to have sort of a voice within the painting. So I have moved heavily in the last 10 years into the world of portrait painting. And when I say portrait painting, I don't mean sort of commissioned paintings per se. You know, I don't have many paintings of High Court judges or that sort of thing. That's not really what I do. But portraits of people, just individual people that try to, in a very basic way, just tell their story through a simple image of them. something that hopefully emotes and connects the viewer with that particular person. And I tend to collaborate with charities and NGOs and paint portraits of the people that they work with. And I'm telling stories, basically. I'm trying to build awareness surrounding the issues that those charities work with through the medium of portraiture. It's a way of disseminating messages. So if you like, it's almost a sort of maybe a sort of reportage style, or sort of, you know, a sort of, yeah, I suppose you could liken it in a way to being a war artist, recording moments of time through the medium of portraiture. And at the moment, that's my inspiration, not least because I get to meet incredibly interesting people, but I'm also getting to see very powerful issues, really, and working with people I would never normally have ever had any contact with. And also there's travel involved as well, you know, international travel as well as domestic travel. And for me, I find that personally very nourishing, you know, and if I can ally my work, my actual physical painting, with something beyond that, then for me, I find that very inspirational. And having a core message within a body of work, for me, is a real driver, you know. So everybody's different, but at this moment in time, that's what I find to be my inspiration. So yeah, I mean, back to you, Andrew. I mean, obviously, you know, would you call yourself a landscape painter, or would you call yourself a painter who paints everything?
It is a tricky one, because I've never tried to kind of print you know, kind of brand myself as one thing or another. And although I do outdoor painting, I wouldn't say I'm primarily a plein air painter. If anything, I'm kind of an outdoor studio painter now, because often what I'm doing when I'm going outside and working outdoors, I'm hitting the same painting 3 to 4 sessions, or even 5, depending on the size of them as well. So I'm really trying to take studio painting outside, in a sense. And so each time I'm going back to the subject outdoors, I'm standing on my own shoulders rather than starting again and again and again. And so I'm feeling like I'm able to go a bit deeper each visit, or each additional visit, if that makes sense. But what I'd like to just pick out what Chris was saying about, we have our own forms that we have an affinity for or with. And, for me, I mean, I'm part of a couple of groups. Obviously, Hayley Joe, you're in the Northern Boys group as well, and I am. And that all, you know, I really love getting out with guys and visiting new places. But I often feel quite alienated when I go to somewhere like London, or, you know, a city that I don't know that well at all. And it's great, but I just feel like I'm just kind of going through the motions of painting. It's more kind of developing a craft. I don't feel like I'm part of that setting, that landscape, and it takes me a long time to tap into subjects. So again, coming back to what Chris said about having your own kind of the forms that you like, the kind of subjects that turn you on as an artist. For me, it's in the local environment. You know, I've been in this area in Doncaster for about 8 to 9 years now, and also the coast, always holidaying along the northeast coast in Yorkshire. So I've kind of got a real affinity for with that setting, that landscape, and the kind of forms that I'm seeing. So at the moment, I am working outdoors. I wouldn't say I am, you know, primarily a plein air outdoor painter, because I do paint across a number of things. But at the moment, I am in the season of painting rural landscape in Yorkshire, in the local setting, and I'm really, at the moment, I'm anchored and hooked on tracks running through the field, you know, the tracks, and I don't know, it's that form for me that I really connect with, in different lights, different times of day, different weathers. And also, as the crops are rotating in the fields, you get different kinds of tracks running through. Some are quite suppressed and not as obvious, whereas the wheat fields I've been painting are very pronounced, especially as the crops are maturing, and you can really see the earth, the mud in between, and just these meandering S-shaped tracks. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But yeah, I think Again, like Chris, I'm waffling actually now, so I'll probably rein it in a bit. I didn't even know what the question was actually.
I'm just going to interject with just a little technical thing, which we can edit out. I think it might be Hayley Joe, because you've had to turn up. Because the thing keeps, the picture goes back to you, which I'm suspecting that because you're turned up, that we're getting kind of feedback as people are talking, which I've just been thinking, and I think it might be from you, Hayley. Now, so if I talk, are we still getting that sort of a little bit, maybe? Oh, is that a little bit better?
I don't know, because I can't hear that, so I don't know.
That's fine.
Because you can actually, if we, I think maybe a way of curing that, because everyone's getting this.
Yeah, I was going to talk about this feedback, but I was going to do it afterwards, really, because I think we've gone this far with it.
I was going to say, if we've all got headphones, if we go on to just having headphone things, we won't get that feedback, because it won't be coming out of our speakers. And have we all got that? If not, don't worry.
I don't.
I can hear it as well, because it is quite distracting. I can hear myself talking.
We can all hear it. So obviously this will be cut.
Stick these in.
So well, yeah, but I think it may be that somebody has another device on the go as well, potentially. That's very often what the issue is.
I'll give it a go with mine. If me and Hayley Joe do it, because we've got them, let's just see if it's any better.
Yeah.
Oh no, I can't use this. This is only for my iPhone.
Oh, I'm the only one with these things.
I'll get some for the next session if I'm invited to the next one.
maybe it's me that's doing it. Is it any better now? I'm doing
it is,
like
Chris.
this?
I think it might be you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, then I get to wear this. That's for my.
Well, no, we're still getting it actually.
I was going to say I can just hear it.
Yeah, we're still getting it.
Okay. We'll talk to David about that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't that bad. I don't think it's, but yeah, I mean, obviously it's something we need to look at.
Yeah.
So we've cut basically, and I'll bring us back in.
Yeah. Okay. Also, it was Andrew saying he was waffling. He's not waffling at all. I understood a lot about what he's talking about. Maybe it's the interesting thing with this is that is how you. I think everybody will know. I'm thinking of the listeners. You know, if I was a listener, you know, what would I be interested in? So what can I grab from what they're doing that replies to like me? And I think it's that holding on. Everybody, whether you're an amateur painter watching this, or you've got people like us who are mad enough to spend our lives doing it, you know what it is. It's one of those things you can't frame it with words. I mean, it's like like painting per se, as we all know. It's just you can't paraphrase what inspiration is, but we know it when we got it. So that's how. You know it when it's there, and you know it when it dies. So maybe an interesting thing to talk about would be ways in which we kind of maintain that interest. So that's going to work for whether you're painting plein air, or sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. It's how you are there any techniques that any of us do that you know, like for example, I mean, I tend to sometimes realize I have to paint in short bursts. I can't sustain, but I know that I'm inspired if I'm working for a couple of hours at a stretch. I think things are going good because I'm interested. Whereas if I go through a phase where I can only work in short bursts and I'm just marking time, and of course the thing starts to dip, which again relates to this business of when you've got something to say. It's like starting a painting. There it is again. Starting a painting, great. Because you've got plenty to say, you're getting it down, and you think, if only I could keep whatever this is up to the finish line, I would just be, I wouldn't even go to sleep. I'd just keep painting because it's so wonderful doing it. So there's some kind of link between the business of starting, and it's no good using terms like, oh, it's fresh and what have you. I mean, those are kind of abstracted words that don't really get at what's going on, you know. So it'd be quite interesting if we could just talk a little bit about what if there's what's the connection? Because there surely is one, I think, between starting a painting and something that's lost in the process of as you continue the painting. And if you can spot, well, why is it that as the painting continues, this sense of inspiration seems to wane if you're not, unless you're really on a good one, and it doesn't, you know, you from the start of the race to the end of the race, it's kind of been rather wonderful. There's been ups and downs, but rather than that thing of almost every time we start a painting, we've got a lot to say, right, I've got to, and then there's a point where we start to, I guess it might be to do with we try and protect what we've got. So in other words, we stop, actually maybe this is it, we stop listening to it. We have something to say at the beginning and there's nothing there because it's a white canvas and we're just doing what we do, and it's beginning to speak. We've got these shapes and colors going on and they're so vividly about what's on your mind, you know, even though it's abstract.
Maybe
yeah.
I could come to Heidi Jo on that and
yeah.
Heidi Jo, I just want to say it's fantastic. You look like you're working in a call center.
Can you?
Yeah.
I don't know if it helps with the.
Well, I don't think we have any reverb at the moment, so who knows? But what do you think about that? About the sort of the genesis of a painting and how you feel about it, and then through the process, do you feel that you can lose that inspiration, or what's your take?
Yeah, I think it's a common. I think every artist is going to know that feeling, aren't they? Because when you, I mean, for a planet, for somebody who's working outside, I often don't know what I don't usually know what I'm going to paint until I see a thing, and then at that moment you're really excited. Hopefully, you're really invested in it, and there's something you want to say about this thing that you've seen. And I think inevitably there comes a point in the painting where where your energy is flagging. Maybe it's not coming across in the painting. The message that you wanted. It's not. You lose faith, or I lose faith in every painting. There's always a point where I think this is a complete disaster, but I'm quite tenacious, and I just plow on, because I think that you keep physically moving. It's often really surprising. Usually, you often get near to the result that you were hoping for if you just don't give in. But I think it's probably the two sides of our brain, and you've got, I've got this visual part, and that's really excited by this thing I've seen, and then I suppose you've got like a really judging voice in your brain. I think so much of painting is about mindset, so I guess that's where maybe the painting starts, well, maybe not going wrong, but what Chris was saying about starts losing its way is maybe if we let that critical voice do too much of the talking. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, it does, actually.
There has to be a really sort of strategic balance between that constructive critical voice, which is absolutely fundamental to painting, and also when something is, you get on top of yourself and actually that worked against you, and knowing where that sort of that tipping point is and being aware of it and sensitive and responsive to it within the painting process, I think is very, very important when determining the outcome of a painting, because when you get on top of yourself, actually you can lose your objectivity.
Tim, what do you mean by getting on top of yourself? What do you mean?
Well, what I mean by that is, if you were to sort of start chastising yourself where certain marks weren't doing what perhaps you wanted them to, or you feel you're losing not control of the painting, but sort of the thrust, the dynamic of what it was that you inspired you in the first place when you sort of, imagined the piece. And then, that can, I think, start to work against you. You can have that sort of downward spiral feeling, which is actually quite difficult to extricate yourself from when it goes too far. So it's knowing when that feeling happens, or it's beginning to happen, and to then sort of go in and say, well, actually, look, this is where this is now. There are a lot of good things going on. What can I do? And be almost forensic about it. What can I do to, keep my objectivity about what it is that I'm doing? And actually sort of saying, well, I can play on the experience of many, many years of painting. And you have, the availability of, you know, tricks up your sleeve, but also you are able to sort of, you know, refocus and recenter yourself in that moment. I think that's also very important. At least that's my, you know, my experience. And I teach a lot, and this is something that I talk to my students about. It's like, well, they say, oh, you know, Tim, I hate it. And I say, well, you know, you seemed to be really flowing 10 minutes ago. What is it that you hate? They're like, well, I don't know. I say, well, that's fine, but that's not helpful for you, actually. You need to know. So go into it, look at things objectively, and try and decide what is it that you don't think is working. That's within your power as a painter to do that. And you are more powerful than you imagine you are. You don't have to cede control of the piece. You can go back in, be forensic, and actually bring it back. And I think that that's something that people struggle with. But actually, if you intervene with yourself in that moment positively, you can then have a positive outcome.
But to be forensic, you need to know that there's a crime, and I think the inspiration is the crime. So that it's one thing, when you lose your way, when you really lose your way, and I agree with what you're saying, Tim. I don't, in principle, I don't have any. I'm just trying to kind of sort of dive into that a bit, saying, well, but there's a layer higher than that. That's on the kind of the ground, on, you know, the nuts and bolts of it. But if that's not instructed by knowing what the crime is, because we could be forensic about anything, we could just, you know, go into a house and think, well, there must have been a crime here. But if you don't know what what the crime is, what are you trying to find? So there's a kind of it stacks up to a higher thing, which is, well, what is the crime? In other words, what is the inspiration? And I think Hayley Joe said something very interesting there with the mindset thing, which linked to what she said about the two sides of the brain. And the old business about the two sides of the brain, the left brain is to do with speech and logic, and the right brain is to do with painting pretty pictures. That's been reserved, but there is now deep studies that are yielding an awful lot, particularly in the work of Ian McGilchrist, about the left and right, the way the left hemisphere attend to the world, and the left hemisphere attends to the world in a very narrow, sharp way about what it can get, what's useful to it, what it can. It's like a bird looking for the seed, whilst the right hemisphere looks at the general world, because in other words, while it's looking for the seed, the right hemisphere is busy looking at being aware of anomalies, so in looking for its lunch, it doesn't become lunch. So that's a really condensed version of some really powerful work that is being done on the left, the nature of the left and right hemispheres. And it seems to me that it's the right hemisphere, you know, when it's going good, the painting seems to kind of make a dance, doesn't it? The brush stroke seems to find it seems to just like drop like a kind of an egg being broken and falling into a bowl. These things sort of, there's a kind of flow state, whereas when you get stuck, that's when you, to kind of trigger yourself back into the flow state, you're doing what you said, Tim, which is, okay, I'm in this state where I'm going to have to kind of break it down in order to start the engine up again. So you're always, so the flow state is allied to inspiration, but the flow is to do with that's always instructed by not losing sight of what it is that the painting's about, which you can't paraphrase. You feel it, but when you feel it, by God, you feel it. You just know, and you know what to do. It's when you come out of that mode, which I think goes to what Hayley Joe was saying. And what Tim's saying, by the way, and Andrew, we've all said it in our different ways, that it's when we start this kind of critical sort of editing bell starts ringing. But for what reason? If it's ringing because, it's usually ringing because you don't want to screw the painting up. You think, oh, this is going rather well, I better not, you know, so you can't have any regard for the past, as Coldstream once said in painting. Yet you've always got to have your eye on what it is that thing that inspiration, your first inspiration, tells you. So it's somehow, and that is allied to this the mindset, and it's when it's like being in the zone and not. And I think understanding the way the hemispheres work is a good, because when you get stuck into this thing of, oh, why isn't this working? You get into a kind of like a naming thing. It's like if you're painting a portrait's a good example. The minute you start naming whatever it is, and vice versa, even with landscape painting, it's the same. The minute it becomes fences and trees and sky, you're looking for this flow between all things. And the painting's cooking when it's doing that, when there's this whole sense that everything's made of the same stuff, yet it's all separate things, yet at the same time it's one and many at the same time. And that can only be achieved by the right hemisphere, which knows the world in a holistic, open, together way, rather than a targeted left hemisphere, left brain thing of, I want that. That's called a nose. I don't want to screw that up. I've got her eye just right there. Don't want to screw that up. And whereas when you're in this state, the brush goes straight across something that your critical eye would think, oh, that's rather good. But if you've only got a part, you ain't got nothing. It's either a whole or you've got nothing. It's no painting is any good if it's just got a nice bit in it. I think that's really key. The mindset thing is very, very key to this. And what helps the mindset flip over is back to when you've got something to say. Because when you've got something to say, it's like the side of the brain that can do this says, hey, I can do that. I know how to do, and you mix the things that are so laborious when you're in the other mindset. Just you think this is so easy. Why can't? And it's really, now it's a hard thing to talk about, and I'm rambling again, but it's a hard thing to talk about because we are dealing with something that is beyond language. Yet we've got to kind of try and come at it from all these different ways.
Interesting point, Chris. So Andrew, I mean, I think you were wanting to say something.
I've probably forgotten by now. No, but that was awesome, Chris, actually. But I just want to pick out a couple of things, actually. And firstly, this thing about energy and how much you've got to give in any given day, or in our situation, in kind of painting session. And I know back in the day when I was a student and just, kind of fresh out of art school, I wanted to prove to the world that I was a painter, and I would paint, I don't know how many hours a day. And I look back and I think, I obviously learned stuff doing that. And that was just me being honest in the moment. That's what I had to do. But I look back and I think, man, I wish I'd just put the brakes on and enjoyed life a little bit more, soaked up some life, got some nourishment for our, just by living and being in community with people. And for me, that's a thing that I really believe strongly in now, that we have a certain amount of energy to give each day. What are we going to give that energy to? And also, how are we going to replace that energy? So I'm making a real point now of just trying to get a bit more balance in my life. So I'm not afraid to paint for 2 hours and then enjoy family for the rest of the day. And on a Sunday, I don't paint. I do nothing. I lap it up. I am just kind of soaking life up to the full at the moment, and it feels great. And I think there's something to be said about that in terms of moving a painting on. I think sometimes if it's not moving on, actually we just need to put the brush down, get some fresh air, take the dog out for a walk, enjoy the kids, whatever it is we need to do. We need to do some fly fishing. I don't know. I know Gregory Mason is a keen fly fisherman apparently. But anyway, so that's the first point. And secondly, actually, Tim, I think you was about to say something, actually, so I'll let you.
Well, I just want to thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to sort of, actually, what you've said there segued very neatly onto what I was going to say anyway, talking about, the sort of the necessity for stillness, for a pause.
Yeah.
I am with you completely, Andrew. I spent 20 years working very, very hard, really pushing, very sort of, studying my craft, but also quite target driven as well. Sort of excuse the slight corporate speak, but I had goals. I wanted to achieve things in my career, which is sort of, I suppose, quite different to maybe the sort of the people's notion of what an artist is or what it is to be an artist. I'm definitely quite sort of driven and quite hard nosed, but I think what I'm trying to say is it's okay to not be inspired as well, actually. I'm not at the moment particularly inspired, and I think that that's circumstantial. I think it's the last 2 or 3 years, with what's been happening, I think has played an enormous part in my painterly response to the world around me. Quite aside from the fact that other life experiences have taken priority. I've got a kid now. I've got another one on the way, and these things are, they definitely distract you, but they're also important. And painting's wonderful, but sometimes it's great not to paint. Yeah. And I think the idea of having a sort of an artist block a few years ago would have been anathema to me. I would have been terrified by that. But now I think it's been a sort of an almost imposed hiatus in my painting, in my career, and I'm very, very glad for it. It means that I've experienced other things more richly, and I've been, as you use the word nourished, Andrew, more nourished by other things. And I've never been the sort of painter that paints every single day. It doesn't work for me like that. Inspiration, we're talking about inspiration, comes at different times. It's not something I just turn on and off, and I'm not saying that you guys do. But that being said, for example, I would do a big exhibition and then I wouldn't necessarily paint for 4 or 5 months because it would take so much out of me, take its toll enormously. So now I think it's just a sort of I'm like in a fallow period, and I feel like I'm sort of recharging my batteries. Yeah. And hopefully when I'm good to go again in a meaningful way, with a sustained body of work of the project that I believe in, then I will be all the sort of more inspired for it, for having had that downtime. So I think that's a really important point. And for all you painters out there, or people who paint, who think, well, all these guys are just going crazy painting all the time, it doesn't work like that. Some people do paint all the time, but some people don't. So don't put too much pressure on yourself, is what I'm saying as a painter. It's important to not paint as well. Anyway, sorry, Andrew.
So the second point I was going to bring up, I had this incredible tutor at university. I studied at Canterbury Christ Church in Kent, and there was a guy there called John Long, an Irish guy, and he studied under you and Uglow, actually the same as Chris. So I believe you did as well, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah.
And but I remember being in the life room, and the life room at Canterbury, and I'm guessing you felt the same kind of thing. The atmosphere, Chris, is so thick, and everyone's down in the dumps. There's, it was a really strange time, and I'm so thankful and grateful for the incredible tutoring that I've had, the education. But man, I look back and wow, what a strange time it was. But anyway, so there's a guy called John Long, and I remember him coming in, and one of the things just a gem really that he dropped in my mind was this idea of finding a point in the subject or in the painting that you truly believe in, that you really believe in, and trying to kind of grow it like a virus. And I know it's probably not the best analogy, post-COVID, but that's what he used. This idea of a virus is once you believe in that area, let it spread like a virus to other areas in the canvas. And that really helps.
That's a great, that's a good analogy, Andrew. Yeah, go on with it. That's a great analogy. I completely.
So this idea of kind of finding the next part that you're going to be passionate about and believe in, and so you're trying to bring the painting up at all the different areas to kind of a good level, to the same level of that very embryonic one that you first believed in, and that always struck me. And but again, that idea of breaks, in the life room, you kind of driven by the life model and what they need as a person. You know, they need breaks, and so you're forced to take a break whether you like it or not as a painter. And again, that was always beneficial for me, just to get out of that kind of really dense atmosphere of depression, everyone down in the dumps. And not always, because, you know, again, you know what it's like. It's 1 minute we're up and then we absolutely rock bottom in a painting, and that's every blooming day. You know, it's for anyone looking from the outside thinking, whoa, what a wonderful life, and think again. It really is up and down, this life as a painter.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have it any other way. What a blessing to, you know, to do this. It's just incredible. But yeah, so that's all I wanted to share really about John Long.
Well, someone said with your broader point, or the broader point here about that you are a human being first and a painter second.
Yeah.
You know, you are a human being first and an accountant second, or a builder second.
Absolutely.
The exceptions are because things like childbirth, there's certain key elements where you are both. You're not human being first and then a mother second. When with childbirth, you are both things together, you know. And I guess what inspiration is kind of, you're trying to do that, but you that's kind of what's happening. But that's nested in the bigger thing where you are. It's like a kind of like a little. It's like like an oasis where you can. It's a ritual. And the importance of rituals we do all the time. So, oh, how are you? How are you doing? You know, we don't sit at a table for meals and shout or have a dump on the table. You know, that would break the ritual. We're not aware of them, but we've always got rituals.
Yeah. And
the ritual painting is whatever we do. Say you knock off work and just take so an amateur painter, and you just find. That's the reason you do it. That's why a hobby is something where there's this little oasis where you try and become what motherhood is. I think that's probably a fair enough analogy. I mean, there might be a better one, but it's the one I can think of off the top of my head. That union between what you do and what you are one thing. And again, we're back to the right brain, the sense of whole. It's not like I do this and then I do that and then I do that. There's no disembodiment. So in the act of paint, whether you're just somebody who is a Sunday painter. I know you're not a Sunday painter, Andrew. That's the last thing because you don't paint. Apart from that, you don't paint on Sunday. But you find this oasis in order to. There's a oneness between your inspiration and what you're doing. It's this kind of circular thing. It's like a kind of motherhood, because, you know, let's face it, if you're making something that you love or you want to love, that's as close as I can think to motherhood. I mean, damn it, I can't think of anything better. And that's probably the most fulfilling thing a human can be, is a parent. Probably is the most fulfilling thing you can do. And so anything else we do is kind of like a little mini version of being a parent if we get it right. Because if it's right, it feels like parenthood it's like a great conversation with friends or sitting down for a meal with your family. When it's right, it's got this sort of, everybody is in a dance and it's all, but you need the rules and the thing of, you know, you don't dump on the table or you don't shout or whatever, in order for it to be a good meal. And in order for it to be a good painting session, the same thing's going on. Or if it ought to be a good picnic or a good bus drive into work or whatever it is you're doing, you're trying to find these. And I think what you're talking, it's about inappropriate love. That if this thing becomes too big, now obviously if you're a professional, you have to give a certain amount of your time to do it, you know. But even within that, there's always an appropriate amount you have to love. Because if you love going for walks, if you just go for walks all the time, you're going to starve and your whole life's going to, you know, go south. So you have to have this sense of appropriateness, even with someone you love. If you just completely devote yourself to them, it becomes obsession. So this thing of appropriateness ties in with a kind of health, which is to do with inspiration. So if you've got a good relationship with what you're doing, you're more likely to, that little oasis and this ritual in which we make something we love can thrive because it's appropriate within the bigger thing in which you know, you are a human being first, which is not to do with importance. You know, it's not hierarchical in that sense. Well, it is hierarchical, but it's not in terms of on a flat plane. Like, okay, so if being a human being first and a painter second, well, let's skip the painting bit and let's be a human being. Well, then where are you? Because you think, well, what does it mean to be a human being? Being a human being is doing all this stuff, but you know, feeding the kids, going to the toilet, mending the roof, you know, whatever it is you have to do. That's what so we are the arena is where we are a human being, but it's finding what you're doing appropriate. It's got to be either big or small, appropriate to what it is. And if you're a painter, you think, oh, if your work starts to become the only thing then that you're interested in, the context that it's in starts to break down. Yeah, and everything breaks down with it. And I think that's what all of us are saying in a different way. I've gone off a bit, so
I think these are incredibly moot points. Everything, all very, very interesting, and I think from a viewer's point of view, absolutely relevant. We are sort of out of time really, but I just wanted to quickly just go back to Heidi Jo. Heidi Jo, is there anything that you wanted to add before we sign off really on this?
I'm just trying to digest all of that. It's also interesting, could talk about it for hours. But I think that finding inspiration and what Andrew was saying about being nourished. Now I'm not a die-hard plein air painter. I don't say I only paint from life, only paint plein air. Not at all, because I hope that I'm always evolving, and in 10 years' time I could be doing abstract paintings in the studio. I mean, I'm open to change. But what I have found about plein air painting is exactly that it nourishes me in those kind of outside ways, outside of just the act of painting, because I'm outside, I'm benefiting from the light, the fresh air, but the experiences that happen to you and the people that you meet, and it just feeds me in a way that locking myself away in a studio I just need that external and nourishing, I think, is the word that, like Andrew said. I just think there's so much of your time involved in not painting. I like to meet up with other painters. Plein air painters seem to like to do it together, and all of that just feeds into my experience of being an artist. It's not just about the putting the paint on the canvas. And I also don't think we can talk inspiration without talking about other artists' work and how much we've taken from paintings that we've seen from other painters.
Absolutely, Heidi Jo, and that is something that we haven't touched on, but obviously we do have a limited period of time, so we can't talk about everything. So guys, hopefully as if you're watching this, hopefully you can see that there are so many different takes on on inspiration and how it changes for each individual from day to day, from week to week. But hopefully you have found some of this inspiring, and you can take some of these ideas and bring them into your own sort of day-to-day work and your own practice. So I'd just really like to say thank you very much to everybody who's joined today. So thank you very much, Heidi Jo, Andrew, and Chris. And I'm sure we'll be doing more of these in the future. So keep tuned in, watch this space, and we'll be talking about other lofty, arty issues as well. So see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.